Okay, so this alternate history will be kind of different because it won't be mapping, but rather I will talk more about some facts. And since we are talking in this video about the Roman Empire, what if the Roman Empire never fell? We actually cannot really predict any possibility how the Roman Empire could look like on a map. But however, we can make assumptions what could happen if the Roman Empire never fell. And before we start with this point, we have to look further into the details that were responsible for the decline of the Roman Empire. And the very first point could be the fact that Christianity spread overall in the Roman Empire, and we all know that the Romans before they had their own religion, well, we don't really know the name, but we call it today paganism. And with Constantine the Great, there was the first Roman emperor who converted to a different religion than the one that was normally spread all over the Roman Empire, or at least spread by the Romans. So that's the very first point which was responsible for the decline of the Roman Empire, and which is discussed by many scholars. The second one is that we have in Western Europe, what we call today Western Europe, this one part like France, and then it goes down to Germany, almost Munich, and then Vienna, and then border Hungary, Slovakia, and then down to Romania. This was a very, very long border, and you had many places there that were not, how should I say, they were not to defend in a natural way. And many barbarians or Goth people or Franks or whoever they were, they entered the Roman Empire. So we call it today the barbarian invasion or the barbarian migration, or some historians even call it the Great Immigration, which was a consequence of the Huns who haunted and who also, well, not really conquered, but who threatened the Germanic people, and they had to move as a consequence. So the only place was the Roman Empire for them. That's the second point. Third point could be that the administration of the Romans was not really performant, and they had a lot of corruption, and it just didn't work the way it should normally work, and this also led to many problems. The fourth point could be that, yeah, economical problems. The Romans had some economical problems, or even many, but then there are also many historians who argue that at the end of the 3rd or 4th century after Christ, they quickly recovered by this economical crisis that they had. So I would not enter into detail with this point, with the economical point, because honestly I'm no economist, and it's also kind of more difficult for me. And the fifth point is that the emperors were not good enough. So you had, for instance, some emperors who reigned there only like 2-3 years. They died. They also had no heir, which also led to problems like internal fights. And then if someone was there on the throne, he was not competent enough, or he just didn't know what to do. And this also led to many problems. So now let's see how the Roman Empire would never fall. First of all, I would go back to Constantine the Great, or even before, but I would say or try to change the fact that Christianity became the state religion, or that Christianity was even adopted by a Roman emperor. At first, Christianity did not really become a state religion because this happened only after Constantine, even after Julian. And Constantine, he became Christian, yes, but he, I don't think he tried to push away the old pagan influence, you know. And in fact, I would also go to the point of Julian, who converted back to the old pagan religion, and I would make him live a little bit longer because he died in a battle against the Sassanid Empire, I think. But I would make him live kind of a bit longer because he made many laws during that time that were pushing in a mild way the Christian influence way. Like, for instance, the educational laws, where Christian teachers could not teach to the children their stuff. And maybe you could also do it in other domains like public administration or in trade. I don't know. It can happen anywhere if he would live longer, but I'm sure that if Julian would live longer, the Christian influence would decline and there would be more stability. Because let's see also the other fact. The Christians are told, you shall not kill. And if they enter the army, the Roman army, and they have to fight against the barbarians, what are they doing? Well, at first, they are listening to their one God. There's only one God for the Christians. Secondly, they will most likely not kill because the Bible says so and God tells them to do so. And every order that comes from the emperor or in the name of the emperor will maybe not be respected since the emperor has not the same value as God for them. So as the Christianity would decline, many problems like this one, for instance, they would just go away. About the so-called barbarians, things would rather be a bit more complicated. At first, the Romans, they should not go on any expansion anymore. And I think at that time, when they were falling, and even after Augustus, they did not have any great expansion anymore. That was the time of peace, I think, the Pax Romana. And I would try to bring the Roman Empire into the situation where peace was actually something good. You know, you had trade, you had revenues, you had money, and the state or the administration, they could function as well because there was money flowing. With the barbarians who entered the Roman territory, we can have like the split opinion about them. At first, not every one of them was like a warrior or trying to conquer territory of the Roman Empire, but many of them, they would just come because they just had no other way. Because the Huns, they drive them away. They could also just live as any kind of federacy that they had, or any other kind of warrior that lived there on the border region, because the Roman Empire made treaties with these people there that said they can do whatever they want, even have their own religion, even their own language, culture, whatever, but they have to follow the orders of the emperor and they have to defend the borders. That's all. So if they would apply to this, and you always have someone who is doing something crazy or who's trying to be, I don't know, a king or whatever, but this problem would only arise if the emperor is dead, because like this all the treaties will be done. So in order to keep control over the Germanic people and the other tribes that migrated into the Roman Empire, you would have at first, you need to have a strong emperor who will not die, and who is also very present because, as always, the Roman emperors, they had a huge prestige. Another fact is that, for instance, if some Germanic people are trying to conquer the territories, the Roman Empire would, yes, they would lose territory because this was too much for them to handle if all of them were kind of warrior-like. But I think after some decennies or centuries, the Romans, they would be able or manage to conquer these territories back, because they, even if they made many wars, they were kind of tolerant in the aspect of culture and also religion. Many of their gods, they were actually like the same, or had the same functions almost as the ones of the other people, like the Celtic one in Gallia, or for instance also the Germanic people, just with other different names. And as long as they would just do what the emperor says, even if they don't believe into that, the Romans would never care. They would just care, okay, they are paying their taxes, they are doing what the emperor says, they are defending the border region, that's fine. And there would also not be any kind of uprising against the Romans or so, because there would always be an emperor who is there. So with more stability, like weak Christianity, and also the Romans who are not trying to conquer everything but rather on a defensive way, even accepting losses, the empire could be very stable. Well, the fact that there was corruption and that the administration was not really well, this is something, I don't know, we can change it since we even still have this today. However, for the Roman emperors, I would think the best thing they could do was like trying to install their own dynasty, and also to avoid at any cost that there were more than one emperors, because this would always lead to trouble. And Constantine actually managed to push away any other conquerors and rivals, so that he would be the only emperor. And if this continued, and if we would have Julian, who is living longer and trying to push away Christianity, there would be for sure a bit more stability. And also with this, we have to see that, for instance, since Christianity will not spread that much or even become a minor religion, it should be also possible that they would just be seen as one of the many religions in the Roman Empire. So there would be no persecution, but the Roman emperors would never convert to Christianity or become Christians themselves, which will also lead to no Islam into this timeline. I would also think that the Roman Empire, if they become more stable, they would perhaps go for little territorial conquests, but they should actually try to just remain as they are at that moment, because sometimes it's just better to have less territories, because then the control is much easier. Also, if they just have one emperor and not many ones, it's also easier for them. And if the question about the hair also is also regulated, the barbarians, they would most likely not make an uprising or rebel against the Roman authority, because the treaty, which was concluded in the name of the emperor and between the barbarians, would always be in place, since nobody of one of the partners would die. There would always be one of them. And like this, I would also think that there would be no dark age. The sciences, they would evolve much better, Maybe not as fast as, let's say, that they would fly to the moon in the 11th century, no, but maybe they would be a bit better as us with the sciences. It's also possible that they would remain stable. I mean, that they would not become any better in sciences, like China, for instance, which was also a huge empire. I am sure that since the Silk Road and the trade routes with India would not be cut by the Ottoman Empire or any other empire that would normally exist around our times, the Romans would have no need to discover the Americas or to go there, because simply they would always have possibilities to trade with other empires without being interrupted. So, like this, they could manage to industrialize much earlier than at our timeline, that would be for very sure. They would also maybe try to conquer or not other territories or even colonize, but I'm not sure yet. I think slavery could later on be abolished simply because of the philosophy, which was very, very evolved in the ancient times, but they would evolve much better because there would be no break for the evolution of the sciences, and they would actually condemn slavery, for instance. This would be a huge break in the Roman economy, but I'm sure that with new technologies they could just simply replace slaves with any kind of invention that they were making. Also, because there would be no colonization of the Americas, for instance, or Africa, there would be a chance that, for instance, the Aztec Empire would survive, the Inca would manage to survive. They would also maybe have peaceful relations with the Roman Empire and make trades. The only one I could see as a problem, or the only border region I could see as huge problem, is the one of the Middle East with the Sassanid Empire. And I'm pretty sure that the Roman Empire would be in a state of cold war with the Sassanid Empire. So I think that was very, very, very briefly described and also analyzed what could have happened if the Roman Empire never fell. There are, of course, many, many other facts, but I think for most of it, I tried to cover all which I knew. And I hope you liked it, and in the future I will also make more videos as this one. Have a nice day.